This is the formula sheet for areas of different shapes. You'll be allowed to use this on the test. Let's just talk about the formulas we see here, the perimeter and the area formulas. So a lot of these are equations that we use on a fairly regular basis. For this rectangle, the perimeter in general is length plus width plus width. This means you have two lengths and two widths. I often write 2L plus 2W. And in the case down below, they've factored out a common factor of 2, and they've written it out front. Remember, the 2 could just be distributed back in, and you would still get 2L and 2W. This only works if you're doing the perimeter of the whole entire rectangle. Some questions might only have half the rectangle, 3 sides of the rectangle. You have got to pay attention. For the area, it's simply the length times the width. Parallelogram. So we talked about parallelograms previously. Opposite sides are parallel, and this h here is the height, and the height goes from one parallel side to the other, and it has to be perpendicular. It has to be at a 90-degree angle. Oops. Sometimes they draw the height outside, and that's okay. Depending on the shape, they might not have space to put it in there. So if you're doing the perimeter, again, it's just going around for a little walk around the shape, and you have to add up all the sides you go by, C plus B plus C plus B. For the area, you have to do the base times the height. Now for the base times the height, if you ever forget this, there's a little trick. Let's see if I can do the trick here perfectly the first try. So this is my parallelogram. And when you just look at this, how does it make any sense as the base times the height? Why doesn't C have anything to do with this? It can be a little tricky until you think about it this way. I'm going to cut the shape that is making this very confusing, and I'm going to pull it over to over here. And I need a very special cutting tool, so this will work. And if I drew a perfect parallelogram, this side would line up with that side. And now I have a rectangle. I cut off a chunk of the parallelogram and just moved it to the other side, filled in that gap, and I have a parallelogram. Oh, so we already knew the bottom piece was, so we started off with something like this with the base and with a height, and we cut this chunk and we put it over here. So did the base change? This length of the line, a piece was cut off, but it was put back over here, so the length is still the base, and the height didn't change. It's still the height. And now it's just the area of a rectangle, base times height. Okay, next with the triangle. So it's very similar with the triangle. Go for a walk around the outside to figure out the perimeter, A, B, C, all the way around, back to the beginning. Now how do we figure out the area? So we've got a triangle like this. The height again runs perpendicular to the vertex across from it. And the base is right here. So if you think about it, we could take this triangle, and if we had two of them, if we had another one of these triangles, we could take it. Let's see how well I can use the tools here in Paint to do this. If I was doing this on paper, I would just make copies of the shapes and I would cut them out, I think. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to try to do that here. I'm going to do copy, paste, bring it here. So I have another one that's the exact same size. Now I can rotate it around 180 degrees and notice that these pieces actually kind of fit together. I'm going to try to use that close cropping tool. That's not very close. Close cropping tool and get this in as close as I possibly can. All right. Now what shape do I seem to have? That's a parallelogram with a base B and a height h. We can do the exact same thing with the trapezoid, where we take that trapezoid shape that we're starting off with, we flip it upside down, we slide it into place, and now these two trapezoids together make a parallelogram. Let's just go back to the triangle for a second. So notice the formula is base times height, but because there's two triangles, it would make a whole parallelogram that's twice as big. We have to divide it by 2. And for the trapezoid, there are 2 trapezoids, so the trapezoid would have the notation base and A at the top. So the A is down here because I flipped it upside down, and the base is there, and the height is still just the height. So in this case I have A plus B times H to make it like a parallelogram, because the parallelogram would be the whole bottom piece times the height. So A plus B times height. This is twice as big as I want. This is 2 trapezoids. So I also want to divide by 2. So that's where these formulas come from, and it can help you to remember them if you need to remember them, or just understand them much better